Ethan had stopped believing in miracles. Until that night, Ethan and Isabella had just walked out of a charity dinner. The kind where everyone smiles for the cameras, shakes hands, and pretends to care. They were halfway to the car when Isabella suddenly stopped. She didn't say anything at first. She just stared past Ethan, her hand frozen in mid-step. "What is it?" he asked. Her eyes didn't move. "Look over there." Ethan turned his head. In the shadows of a narrow alley, a boy sat on the cold ground. His arms were wrapped tight around his legs, his bare feet pulled close to his chest like he was trying to keep whatever little warmth he had left. His clothes were torn. He was so thin, it looked like a strong wind could knock him over. And then Isabella said it, soft, almost like she didn't want the words to exist. "He looks like your son." Ethan's chest tightened instantly. 10 years ago, his son Daniel had been taken. One moment they were at the park. The next he was gone. No goodbye. No explanation. Just an empty space Ethan had never been able to fill. He'd spent years chasing leads, spending money, begging for answers, and finding nothing. Eventually, he stopped looking. It was the only way to survive. Now, staring at this boy, every wall he'd built around himself started to crack. It couldn't be him. It was impossible. But it could be. The thought was dangerous. Ethan took a step toward the boy. His heartbeat was so loud, it drowned out everything else. One look, and 10 years of pain came rushing back. 10 years ago, Daniel was 6. It was a sunny afternoon at the park. Ethan had looked away for just a few seconds, long enough to check his phone. When he looked back, the swing was empty. At first, he thought Daniel had just wandered to the slide. Then he thought maybe he was playing hide and seek. But within minutes, panic set in. People started looking. Police were called. Strangers described a man leading a boy away. That was the last real moment Ethan had with his son. The years after were nothing but a blur of desperation. He hired private investigators, paid bribes, followed every lead, no matter how small. Every single one ended in a dead end. The search drained his bank account. And his marriage. His wife couldn't take the constant disappointment. She left. Friends stopped calling. Ethan buried himself in work, building his company higher and higher, as if more success could keep the grief from crushing him. And now, here he was, looking at a boy huddled in an alley. Those eyes, the same deep brown as Daniel's, the same shape, the same quiet intensity. And there, a faint scar on the boy's temple. Daniel had gotten that when he was 4, falling off a swing in their backyard. Ethan's heart pounded so hard it almost hurt. His mind screamed at him not to believe it. But his feet moved anyway. Ethan lowered himself to one knee, looked the boy in the eye, and asked softly, "What's your name?" The boy's answer knocked the air right out of him. Ethan didn't want to scare him. So instead of pressing for answers right there in the alley, he and Isabella brought the boy to a local shelter. The moment they walked in, Isabella switched into a mode Ethan had never seen before. She demanded warm blankets, told the staff to get him hot soup, asked for a doctor to check him over. The boy didn't resist, but he didn't exactly welcome the help either. He kept his arms wrapped around himself, shoulders tense, eyes darting to every sound in the room. When the soup came, he took 2 small sips and set the bowl down. Ethan could see the bones in his wrists. Ethan sat down across from him. "You didn't answer me before," he said gently. "What's your name?" The boy stared at the floor for what felt like a full minute. Then, without looking up, he whispered it. "Daniel." Ethan's stomach flipped. His chest tightened like someone had wrapped a steel band around it. It could be him. It could also just be a cruel coincidence. The kind of thing that would rip his heart open all over again. He wanted to believe. God, he wanted to believe. But he'd been wrong before. And if he let himself believe now? Ethan took a slow breath. "We're going to find out for sure," he said quietly, more to himself than to the boy. The next morning, he called the lab. They would run a DNA test. No more guessing. Sometimes waiting hurts more than the truth. The lab said it could take a few days. Those days felt like weeks. Ethan stopped going into the office. Every morning, he found himself at the shelter. He told himself it was just to check in, but he stayed for hours. The boy didn't talk much, but little things stood out. The way he tilted his head when he was curious. Daniel used to do that. How he pushed his food to one side of the plate before eating. Daniel did that too. Ethan didn't dare point it out. He just watched. Over time, the boy started sharing fragments of his life. Nothing detailed, just bits and pieces. Sleeping under bridges, eating from trash cans, moving from one stranger's couch to another. Ethan's chest ached hearing it. Every new detail made the thought harder to push away. It could be him. He didn't want to imagine the things the boy had gone through. But the more he learned, the harder it became to keep his distance. Isabella tried to keep him grounded. "Let's wait for the test," she kept saying. "We can't get ahead of ourselves." She was right. But Ethan already knew. If the call came back negative, it was going to break him all over again. On the fourth day, his phone rang. It was the lab. "Mr. Blackwood, we have your results." The first word from the lab changed everything. "Mr. Blackwood," the voice said on the other end of the line. "It's a match. The boy is your son." For a second, Ethan couldn't speak. His grip on the phone tightened until his knuckles hurt. When he finally hung up, he went straight to the shelter. Daniel was sitting at the table, staring at a half-empty cup of soup. Ethan walked over, knelt down, and pulled him into his arms. "I found you," he whispered. "I finally found you." But Daniel didn't melt into the hug. He stayed stiff, his arms at his sides, his head turned slightly away. Ethan didn't take it personally. He knew this wasn't the kind of moment where everything magically went back to normal. Finding him was one thing. Fixing what was broken, that was going to take time. Still, just having him here in front of him, breathing the same air. It was something Ethan had prayed for every day for 10 years. Isabella stood behind them, her hand covering her mouth. She didn't say a word. Later that night, they brought Daniel home. Ethan had set up a warm, comfortable bedroom for him. A real bed, soft blankets, clean clothes. When he showed Daniel the room, the boy just stood in the doorway, eyes scanning the space like it was a trap. "I'll sleep on the floor," he muttered. No matter how gently Ethan tried, Daniel refused to get in the bed. Saving him was the easy part. Helping him live again was harder. The first week home was rough. Daniel avoided looking anyone in the eye. If Ethan tried to hold his gaze for more than a second, Daniel's eyes would drop to the floor. Loud sounds, a door slamming, a car horn outside, made him flinch so hard it was like he expected to be hit. He spoke in short, clipped answers. Sometimes not at all. Ethan tried to remember what the counselor had told him. Don't push. Let him come to you. It wasn't easy, but there were small wins. One night, Daniel ate an entire plate of pasta without stopping halfway. Another afternoon, when Ethan made a dry joke, Daniel's mouth twitched into what might have been the start of a smile. It was gone in a second, but Ethan caught it. Those little moments kept him going. Isabella was the glue holding it all together. She kept reminding Ethan that progress wasn't measured in days or weeks. It was measured in trust. And trust takes time, she'd say. Still, the weight of guilt never left Ethan's shoulders. Every time Daniel flinched or hesitated, he wondered what exactly his son had lived through in those missing years. Then, one afternoon, Ethan came home from a meeting and the house was too quiet. "Daniel," he called. No answer. He checked his room. Empty. Checked the kitchen. The backyard. Nothing. Panic rising. Ethan realized Daniel was gone. The fear was back, stronger than ever. Ethan grabbed his keys and tore out of the driveway. Isabella was already on the phone, calling every place she could think of: the shelter, the counselor, a couple of neighbors who had met Daniel once. Nothing. Then a call came in from a friend who lived near the old community park. "I think I just saw him," they said. Ethan drove straight there. And there he was, Daniel, sitting on one of the swings, his hands gripping the chains, slowly rocking back and forth. Relief hit Ethan so hard he almost felt dizzy. But as he walked toward him, Daniel didn't run away. He didn't even look surprised. "I wanted to see if someone would come for me," Daniel said quietly, eyes still on the ground. Ethan knelt down so they were face to face. "Daniel, listen to me. I will always come for you. Always." Daniel's lip trembled just slightly. Then, for the first time since they'd found him, he leaned forward and wrapped his arms around Ethan's neck. It wasn't a polite hug. It wasn't stiff. It was tight, desperate, and real. Ethan closed his eyes and held on. When Daniel finally pulled back, he looked at Ethan for a long second. "Can I call you Dad again?" 2 months later, life felt normal, until that question. 2 months after the park, things were finally starting to feel steady. Daniel was going to school a few days a week. He was eating full meals. He even laughed sometimes. Not just a quick smile, but real, from-the-gut laughter. That afternoon, Ethan was in the kitchen making coffee when he heard footsteps overhead. A few minutes later, Daniel came down from the attic, holding something in his hands. It was a small, red toy car. The paint was chipped on one side. One of the wheels was missing. "I remember this," Daniel said, turning it over in his fingers. "I used to race it on the floor in your office." Ethan felt a lump rise in his throat. "Yeah, you did." Daniel looked at the toy for a moment longer, then looked up. His voice was quiet, but steady. "Why didn't you find me sooner?" The question landed like a punch to the chest. Ethan opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He'd imagined a lot of conversations with Daniel over the years. This was the one he'd always feared the most, because the answer, the real answer, was going to hurt them both. Ethan took a slow breath, knowing whatever he said next could change everything. Some truths hurt, no matter how honest they are. Ethan sat down across from Daniel at the kitchen table. He didn't look away. "I tried," he said quietly. "I tried every single day. I searched everywhere I could. I hired people. I followed every lead, no matter how small. But every time I got close, it slipped away. And after a while, it felt like I was chasing shadows." Daniel's fingers traced the chipped edge of the toy car. He didn't say anything. Ethan leaned in. "I failed, Daniel. I hate that. I hate that I couldn't bring you home sooner." Daniel finally looked up, his brown eyes steady. "You never stopped loving me, right?" Ethan's voice caught in his throat. Not for a second, not once. For a long moment, they just sat there, looking at each other. Then Daniel gave the smallest nod, and something shifted. From that day on, he called Ethan Dad every single day. Sometimes it was casual. "Dad, can I have some juice?" Sometimes it was quiet, almost like a reassurance to himself. "Good night, Dad." And every time, Ethan felt the same thing: gratitude, relief. Weeks later, they were in the garden. Daniel was chasing the dog across the grass, laughing so hard he nearly tripped. Ethan stood there, frozen for a second, realizing he was hearing a sound he thought he'd never hear again. Ethan thought he was saving his son, but it turned out the other way around. Months later, Daniel was a different kid. He had friends at school. He came home talking about science projects and soccer games. He ate like he was making up for lost time. He slept through the night, without waking in a panic. The walls in his eyes, the ones Ethan had seen that first night in the alley, were coming down. Ethan watched it all happen, and one truth kept hitting him. Finding Daniel hadn't just saved the boy's life, it had saved his too. He couldn't change the 10 years they'd lost. He couldn't erase the pain, but he could choose what happened next. And every day, he chose to show up. Because that's what Daniel needed. That's what love is. Some people think kindness is a small thing, but Ethan knew better now. Kindness can change everything. Kindness can heal. One evening, they were walking home from the park, the dog trotting beside them. Daniel reached over, grabbed Ethan's hand, and didn't let go the whole way. Ethan glanced down at him and smiled. "We've come a long way, huh?" Daniel just nodded. Tease. And as they stepped inside, Ethan thought, some stories are just beginning.